Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a veteran, spent 8 years in the Army before I got out and started working in IT. After years of living in apartments and dealing with terrible landlords, I finally saved up enough to buy my first house. It wasn't anything fancy, just a nice little 3-bedroom ranch in a suburban neighborhood. The realtor mentioned there was an HOA, but she brushed it off like it was no big deal. Said they just kept the common areas nice and made sure people didn't paint their houses weird colors. Moving day was brutal. You know how it is. Boxes everywhere, trying to figure out where everything goes, dealing with utility companies. But I was excited. This was my house. My little piece of the American dream. After sleeping on air mattresses and living out of boxes for a week, I finally started to feel settled. That's when I decided to put up my flag. Now, I'm not some crazy patriot who wraps himself in red, white, and blue. I don't even talk about my military service much. But flying the flag has always been important to me. It's not political. It's personal. It reminds me of the people I served with and the oath I took. So I went to the big box hardware store and bought a nice flagpole kit. Nothing crazy, just a standard 15-foot aluminum pole with all the hardware you need to install it properly. I spent a Saturday morning digging the hole, mixing concrete, and getting everything level. My neighbor across the street even came over to chat while I was working. Seemed like a nice guy. He mentioned that the HOA could be a little picky about some things, but said a flag should be fine. After all, who's going to complain about the American flag? Sunday morning, I attached my 3x5 flag to the pulley system and raised it for the first time. I'm not embarrassed to say it gave me chills watching it go up. There's something about seeing that flag wave in your own front yard that just hits different when you've served. I stood there for a minute, just watching it flutter in the breeze, feeling pretty good about life. That's when I noticed her. There was this woman sitting in a white SUV parked across the street. She had a clipboard in her lap and was definitely staring at my house. When she saw me looking back, she started writing something down. I figured maybe she was a real estate agent or something, so I didn't think much of it. I was wrong. Monday morning, I was getting ready for work when I heard footsteps on my front porch. I looked out the window and saw someone walking away. There was an envelope tucked under my door, official-looking thing with the HOA logo on it. I opened it up and my blood pressure immediately spiked. It was a violation notice. Apparently, I was in breach of bylaw 12.c, which stated that no external structures, poles, or posts exceeding 10 feet in height are permitted without prior written approval from the Architectural Committee. The letter said I had 5 business days to remove the unauthorized installation, or I would face daily fines of $50, starting immediately. But here's the part that really got me mad. The letter didn't just say I was in violation, it called my flagpole an unapproved visual nuisance and an unauthorized installation that detracts from neighborhood aesthetics. They were talking about the American flag like it was some piece of junk I'd thrown in my yard. I sat there reading this thing over and over, getting madder each time. I'd been in the house for exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And they were already trying to bully me over displaying the flag. I decided to be the bigger person and try to work it out. The letter was signed by someone called the board president. There was a phone number, so I called it. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp and impatient right from the start. I introduced myself and explained that I'd gotten the letter about my flagpole. I told her I thought there might be some misunderstanding since it was just a standard American flag. Her response was immediate and dismissive. She said there was no misunderstanding at all. Rules are rules. A pole is a pole. It was over 10 feet. It was an eyesore. Take it down. I stayed calm and mentioned that I was pretty sure federal law protected my right to display the flag. That's when she cut me off completely. She said not to federal law her. This was private property. The HOA rules superseded everything. She said they would not have their neighborhood aesthetic ruined by my unauthorized structure. 5 days, she said, or the fines start. And if I didn't pay the fines, they'd put a lien on my house. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. I sat there holding my phone, absolutely stunned. I'd tried to be reasonable, tried to work it out, and this woman had basically told me to go screw myself over the American flag in my own front yard. But I figured maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe if I went to the next HOA meeting, I could explain the situation to the whole board. Surely reasonable people would see that this was ridiculous. I was wrong about that too. The next day, Tuesday, I was at a VA appointment for my annual checkup. Nothing serious, just the routine stuff they make you do. The appointment ran long because they were backed up, and I didn't get home until almost 6 p.m. As soon as I turned onto my street, I could see something was wrong. My flagpole was gone, completely gone. There was just a hole in my front yard where it used to be. I parked in my driveway and got out to look. Not only was the pole gone, but whoever took it had done a terrible job. The concrete foundation was broken up and scattered around. My grass was torn up in a big circle around where the pole had been. And there, sitting on my front porch, was my flag. Not folded properly like it's supposed to be, just wadded up in a ball like a piece of garbage. I was shaking. I was so mad. This wasn't just about some HOA bylaw anymore. Someone had come onto my property while I was gone and stolen my flagpole. They damaged my lawn and disrespected my flag. This was personal now. I picked up my flag and went inside to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to march over to the board president's house and demand answers. But my military training kicked in. When you're angry, you don't make good decisions. You step back, assess the situation, and come up with a plan. So that's what I did. I made myself a cup of coffee and started researching. First, I called the police to report the theft. The officer who came out was sympathetic, but he said it was complicated since the HOA might claim they had authority to remove unauthorized structures. He took a report anyway and gave me the incident number. Then I started looking into the federal law I'd mentioned to the board president. Turns out there really is a law about this. It's called the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. I read the whole thing and it's pretty clear. It says that no homeowner association can restrict or prevent a member from displaying the flag of the United States on residential property. But there was a catch. The law does allow for reasonable restrictions on the time, place, or manner of display. Things like size, lighting, stuff like that. I could see how the HOA might try to argue that their 10-foot rule was a reasonable restriction. I kept digging deeper. I read HOA laws for my state. I looked up court cases. I spent hours going down internet rabbit holes about property rights and federal preemption. That's when I found the loophole that changed everything. The HOA bylaw talked about external structures, poles, or posts. But what if it wasn't just a pole? What if it was a permanent, properly permitted installation, the kind that requires city permits and professional installation? I started researching flagpole companies. Turns out you can install some pretty serious flagpoles if you do it right. Commercial grade stuff, 30 feet tall, telescoping, professional lighting, the works. And here's the beautiful part. If you get the proper city permits for it, the HOA's little bylaw about structures over 10 feet doesn't mean squat. City permits trump HOA rules every time. I started making phone calls. First, I called a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. I explained the situation and my idea. She laughed when I told her what I was planning. She said it was legally sound and that she'd be happy to help if the HOA tried to fight it. Next, I called the State Veterans Affairs Office. I explained what had happened and asked if they could provide documentation of my veteran status and the importance of flag display. They were outraged when I told them about the flagpole being removed. The woman I spoke with said they'd write a letter of support immediately. Then I called the City Planning Office. I asked about permits for flagpole installation. The clerk was super helpful. She said as long as it met setback requirements and wasn't a hazard, they had no problem with flagpoles, even big ones. She sent me the permit application and told me what documentation I'd need. Everything was falling into place, but I wasn't done yet. I called a commercial flagpole company and explained what I wanted. A 30-foot telescoping flagpole with a concrete foundation and professional lighting system. The guy on the phone was excited to help. He said he'd done installations for government buildings and military facilities. This would be easy. When I told him why I was doing it, he got even more interested. Turns out he was a veteran too. Navy. He said he'd give me a discount and make sure it was the nicest flagpole in the county. Within a week, I had everything I needed. City permit approved. Veterans Affairs letter in hand. Lawyer on speed dial. Professional flagpole company scheduled for installation. The board president and her little HOA had no idea what was coming. Installation day was a Thursday. The flagpole company showed up at 8 a.m. with a concrete truck, a small crane, and enough equipment to build a small skyscraper. The pole itself was beautiful, gleaming white aluminum with a telescoping design that would let me lower it for maintenance. I took the day off work to supervise, but mainly I wanted to be there to watch, and boy was there something to watch. By 8:30, half the neighborhood was standing in their driveways staring at my house. The board president herself showed up around 9, parking her white SUV right across from my driveway. She had her clipboard naturally, and she was on her phone the entire time the crew was working. The concrete foundation took most of the morning to pour and set. While that was happening, the crew installed the lighting system, professional-grade, upward-facing LED spotlight, just like you see at government buildings, because according to the U.S. flag code, if you fly the flag at night, it needs to be properly illuminated. I was going to follow every rule in the book. Around noon, they started assembling the pole itself, 30 feet of gleaming aluminum with pulleys and hardware that looked like it could hoist a ship's sail. The base section went into the concrete foundation with precision engineering that would make NASA jealous. I have to admit, it was bigger than I'd expected. A lot bigger. When they extended it to full height, it towered over every house on the block. You could probably see it from the highway. The board president was having what looked like very animated phone conversations. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell from her gestures that she was not happy. Around 2 p.m., they were ready to raise the flag. I'd bought a bigger one for the occasion, 6x10 feet instead of my old 3x5. High-quality nylon with embroidered stars and sewn stripes. The kind that costs serious money. The installation crew chief handed me the rope. He said it was my honor as the homeowner and veteran to raise it for the first time. I have to tell you, there was something magical about that moment. The whole neighborhood was watching. The board president was glaring from across the street. And here I was, raising this massive, beautiful American flag on this towering professional flagpole that probably cost more than some people's cars. The flag caught the wind as it went up, and it was like watching a movie. 30 feet of gleaming pole, huge flag snapping in the breeze, professional lighting ready to illuminate it as soon as the sun went down. It was magnificent. The installation crew packed up their equipment and left around 4 p.m. I tipped them well and shook hands with the crew chief. He said he'd never installed a flagpole for a better reason. As the trucks pulled away, I stood in my driveway admiring my new flagpole. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. Professional, permanent, and completely impossible to ignore. The flag was clearly visible from several blocks away in every direction. That's when the board president decided to make her move. She marched across the street and right up my driveway. Her face was red and she was clutching her clipboard like it was some kind of weapon. She started yelling before she even reached me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, calling the flagpole an unauthorized monstrosity, threatening immediate fines and legal action. I stayed calm. I told her the flagpole was fully permitted by the city and that I had all the documentation. I mentioned that I'd also been in touch with my lawyer in the Veterans Affairs office about the theft of my previous flagpole. That seemed to slow her down for a second, but then she doubled down. She said the HOA didn't care about city permits. Their rules were their rules. She said I'd be getting a massive fine and that they'd force me to tear it down. I just smiled and told her to have a nice day. She stormed off, but I could see her on her phone again before she even made it back to her car. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer, watching my flag wave in the spotlight. It was beautiful. Exactly what I'd hoped for when I bought the house. A symbol of everything I'd served to protect, flying proudly in my own front yard. The next morning, Friday, I found another envelope under my door. This one was thick, multiple pages, and the tone was completely different from the first letter. The HOA was not happy. Not happy at all. The letter started with immediate cease and desist in bold capital letters. It said my flagpole was an unauthorized structure that violated multiple HOA bylaws. It demanded immediate removal and imposed a fine of $1,000, effective immediately. But here's where it got interesting. The letter also said they were calling an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss aggressive enforcement action against my blatant disregard for community standards. They were threatening to place a lien on my house and begin foreclosure proceedings if I didn't comply. I read the whole thing twice, then picked up my phone and called my lawyer. She was in court, but her secretary said she'd call me back as soon as possible. An hour later, my phone rang. When I read her the HOA letter, she started laughing. She said it was exactly what she'd expected. The HOA was panicking and overplaying their hand. She asked me to scan the letter and email it to her, then told me not to worry about anything. She would handle it from here. Monday morning, the HOA got their response. But it didn't come from me. It came from my lawyer's office on official letterhead, delivered by certified mail. I didn't see the letter until later, but my lawyer emailed me a copy. I have to say, it was a thing of beauty. The letter was professional, polite, and absolutely devastating. It started by identifying my lawyer as counsel for me regarding the HOA's recent correspondence. Then it laid out the facts like a prosecutor building a case. First, it addressed the theft of my original flagpole. The letter stated that the removal of my 15-foot flagpole constituted theft and property damage, and that I had filed a police report. It said I reserved the right to pursue civil damages for the stolen property and lawn restoration. Then came the legal hammer. The letter explained that my new 30-foot flagpole was not a structure under the HOA bylaw, but rather a permanent installation fully permitted by the city. It included the city permit number and attached a copy of the approval documentation. The letter pointed out that properly permitted city installations take precedence over HOA restrictions. But the best part was the federal law section. The letter cited the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005, explaining in detail how any attempt to restrict my flag display was a direct violation of federal law. It noted that I was a military veteran and that the HOA's actions could constitute discrimination against a protected class. The letter also mentioned that I had contacted the State Veterans Affairs Office and they were monitoring the situation for potential veterans' rights violations. Then came the warning. The letter stated that any further threats, fines, or attempts at communication would be considered targeted harassment of a veteran. It said such actions would be met with immediate legal action, including potential lawsuits for civil rights violations, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The letter ended by saying they trusted this clarified the matter and looked forward to the HOA's prompt acknowledgement of my rights. My lawyer told me she sent copies to every member of the HOA board, not just the board president. She wanted to make sure everyone understood the legal situation. The response was immediate and complete silence. No more letters, no more phone calls, no more fines. The HOA's aggressive enforcement action evaporated overnight. It was like someone had flipped a switch. But I wasn't quite done yet. That weekend, I was doing some yard work when I noticed the board president walking her dog past my house. She was doing her best to avoid looking at the flagpole, but it was pretty hard to miss. 30 feet of gleaming aluminum tends to dominate the landscape. I waved and said good morning. She pretended not to see me and hurried past. A few days later, I ran into my neighbor across the street at the grocery store, the same guy who'd chatted with me when I was installing my original flagpole. He came up to me with a huge grin on his face. He said the whole neighborhood was talking about what had happened. Apparently, the board president had called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my flagpole, but when the other board members saw my lawyer's letter, they immediately voted to drop all action against me. He said there was a lot of yelling and that the board president stormed out of the meeting. But that wasn't even the best part. He told me that several other neighbors had been having their own problems with the HOA's overreach. Apparently, the board president had been going after people for all kinds of petty violations. After seeing how I'd handled the situation, other homeowners were starting to push back too. One family had been fighting a months-long battle over their mailbox design. Another neighbor had been cited for having the wrong shade of white paint on their shutters. A guy down the street had been fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway. All of these cases suddenly got dropped after my lawyer's letter made its rounds. My neighbor said I'd become something of a folk hero in the neighborhood. People were calling me the guy who took down the HOA tyrant. I had to laugh. All I'd wanted was to fly my flag in peace. I never intended to start a revolution, but I still wasn't completely satisfied. The HOA had stolen my property, damaged my lawn, and disrespected my flag. A simple legal letter felt like they were getting off too easy. That's when I came up with the finishing touch. I called the flagpole company and asked about getting a commemorative plaque for the base of the pole. Something small and tasteful, but visible from the sidewalk. The guy remembered my installation and was happy to help. 2 weeks later, a beautiful bronze plaque arrived. Professional quality with raised lettering that would last for decades. I installed it myself on a Saturday morning, mounting it securely to the concrete base of the flagpole. The plaque was simple and elegant. It read, "Dedicated to freedom and the HOA who tried to stop it." I have to admit, I was pretty proud of that little addition. Every time someone walked by my house, they'd see that plaque and remember what had happened here. The HOA's attempt to bully a veteran had backfired spectacularly, and now there was a permanent reminder of their failure right there in bronze. The board president's reaction was predictably dramatic. According to my neighbor, she called another emergency meeting to discuss the plaque. But, by this point, the other board members were done with her crusades. They told her to drop it and focus on actual HOA business instead of harassing homeowners. A few months later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that the board president had resigned from the HOA board. Apparently, she'd gotten into arguments with everyone and couldn't get support for any of her enforcement ideas. She still lived in the neighborhood, but she'd lost all her power to make other people's lives miserable. The new board leadership was much more reasonable. They focused on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. The petty enforcement actions stopped completely. As for my flagpole, it became a neighborhood landmark. People would give directions using it as a reference point. Turn left at the big flagpole, they'd say. Kids would use it as a meeting spot. During holidays, neighbors would comment on how nice the flag looked flying so high. I started getting comments from people who didn't even live in the neighborhood. Drivers would slow down to look at it. A few veterans stopped by to shake my hand and thank me for standing up for what's right. One evening, about 6 months after the whole thing started, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying a beer and watching my flag in the spotlight. It had become a regular routine for me. There's something peaceful about watching the flag wave against the night sky. A car pulled up and an older gentleman got out. He was wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap and walked with a slight limp. He approached my porch with a respectful nod. He introduced himself as a Navy veteran who lived a few towns over. He said he'd heard about my fight with the HOA and wanted to see the flagpole for himself. He stood there for a few minutes, just looking up at the flag. Then he turned to me and said something I'll never forget. He told me that what I'd done wasn't just about one flagpole or one HOA. He said it was about standing up for the principles that flag represents. Freedom, respect, the right to live with dignity on your own property. He shook my hand, saluted my flagpole, and drove away. I sat there for a long time thinking about what he'd said. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm glad it happened the way it did. Sure, it would have been easier if the HOA had just left my original flagpole alone, but their overreach taught me something important about standing up for yourself and your rights. The HOA thought they could bully me because I was new to the neighborhood and didn't know the rules. They thought their little power trip would intimidate me into compliance. They thought wrong. Instead of backing down, I used their own system against them. I followed every rule, got every permit, and built a better flagpole than they could ever have imagined. When they tried to fight it, I had federal law, city permits, and a good lawyer on my side. The best part is that my flag now flies higher and prouder than it ever could have on that original 15-foot pole. Every morning when I leave for work, I see it waving 30 feet above my house. Every evening when I come home, it's there to greet me, perfectly illuminated against the sky. The HOA learned a valuable lesson about picking fights they can't win. The neighborhood learned that bullies can be stopped if you're willing to stand up to them. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting smart and using the law to protect what's right. My flagpole stands as a permanent reminder of what happens when petty tyrants try to trample on American values. They got a 30-foot professionally lit monument to their own defeat, visible for miles around every single day. I couldn't have planned a better outcome if I'd tried. And you know what the most satisfying part is? Every time that flag waves in the wind, it's not just representing my service or my patriotism. It's representing the principle that in America, even the smallest homeowner can stand up to bullies and win, as long as they're willing to fight smart instead of just fighting mad. The board president learned that lesson the hard way, but I suspect she won't forget it anytime soon. These days, my neighborhood is a much more peaceful place. The new HOA leadership focuses on bringing the community together instead of tearing it apart. People actually talk to each other instead of just looking for violations to report. And my flagpole, it's exactly what I wanted when I first moved in. A symbol of freedom, flying proudly in my front yard, reminding everyone who sees it that this is America. And in America, we don't back down from bullies. The HOA tried to take my flag down. Instead, they helped me raise it higher than ever. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Backstory. I was in a desert country that was very hot while in the military. I was one of the newer members to the group when they gave us a free plane ride out there. My job was not combat-oriented in any way and far away from most danger. However, because I was newer instead of a normal weapon to carry daily, 15 HRS a day, 7 days a week, I was assigned the heavy size. After about a month into this, me and the other people assigned this weapon are complaining. We do not need these readily available as our job is not to provide immediate defense. I worked in a section that consistently dealt with warrant officers. To those not in the know, these WOs are very known for their no-nonsense, get the job done in the best way possible without messing with the standard. They are the keepers of the standards and would expect nothing less. One day, a warrant officer 5 saw me carrying this weapon and asked me why I had it. I explained it was the weapon assigned to me, and as an officer, he replied, "I have a pistol. My substantially lighter weapon is in the armory. Tell them to exchange my heavy for his. I am through the moon. After the exchange, I go to the smoke pit and show off my new weapon." Eventually, my first-line supervisor sees me and asks how I got it. I explain the orders given to me. He responds with, "Is he your front-line supervisor?" He makes me resubmit my new weapon for the old. Now the fun part. I worked in an area where sometimes we went to where the WOs were on assignment. I took the job to go deliver something, and the WO5 sees me with the old weapon. He asks if I had a chance to exchange. I reply I did, but my SGT said to change it back. His response was, "Did you tell him it was my order?" Me: "Yes, sir." "Okay, OP, follow me. Anybody who has an idea of the Army knows that a WO5 outranks a SSGT by a mile, so countermanding his orders better have a good excuse." We get to the SS Jut's office, and the WO5 asks him what happened. The SSGT gave some BS excuse, then the WO5 said snap to attention. WOs, as a rule, don't adhere to normal standards. The WO5 then excused me, told me to switch weapons, and lock the door. I stayed just long enough to hear a lot of yelling curse words and counting push-ups. The next one is an entitled people story. My sister is a police officer and her husband also. They are very judgmental, constantly speak badly of indigenous people, are full-on racist, and view me as a lowly member of the public. They walk around talking about who are great people and who are not, based on their opinions, not on anything substantial, just usually other police officers. Her children call us poor. As they go to a top private school, we send our kids to a public school. They constantly have digs about it, my two children sharing a bedroom together. She tells her kids about all the embarrassing things that happened to me as a child. I was overweight, I had pimples, I had only one friend, blah blah blah. I was very sick with gastro on a holiday and crapped my pants when I was 9. They went on about that one for weeks. She also often snidely and passive-aggressively reminds me that I don't own anything. We do okay, but we are not a pair of cops on $300,000 per year. They are high-ranking. They are vile people towards me. I cannot comment on behalf of how others feel, but I feel awful when around them. I went no contact at the beginning of this year as I could no longer mentally handle the way they treat us and my partner. The thing is, for years leading into her starting work in the police force, she stole thousands and thousands of dollars worth of clothing from Meyer. She'd go in regularly, put it on under her clothes in the change rooms with her, then boif and walk out. It happened often for a good long while. I have this on her and have never said a word. To her, since it happened, or her husband. I know because back then we were close. I would be outside watching them walk out. I wouldn't participate. Granted, we were 17, 18 years old, but she still did it. I very much doubt her husband and kids know. I know for a fact it would never have been disclosed to the force. How can I use this? I would never do it. But fantasizing makes me feel somewhat better about how crap she is. I obviously have no proof other than me witnessing and her boyfriend at the time backing my story. No idea where he ended up. The person she used to be, I would never have dreamed we would end up here. The next one is an entitled parent story. For some background, I, 24, am currently doing a conversion course in law after finishing my undergrad this year. Due to how high the cost of postgraduate courses are, I decided to move back home for this year and do my course in the university very close to my hometown. My girlfriend, 23, lives at home too, and works as a shop floor worker while she is also doing a master's course. She has had to deal with 2 chronic health conditions throughout her life, an underactive thyroid and OCD. I'm no expert, so I may butcher the exact wording of this. That relates to her not wanting to ingest anything that's dirty. This OCD causes her to visually inspect every plate or cutlery that she's about to use, even if it's just been washed. And if she doesn't do this little ritual, she mentally can't allow herself to eat. When she was a teenager, this fear of contamination led to her being extremely underweight and depressed. My girlfriend has been with me for over 3 years now, and ever since my mom met her, she had a dislike for my girlfriend. Due to the thyroid issue, my girlfriend was quite overweight when she first met my mom, which my mom disliked because even though I am not that slim, I'm older and GF is too young to let herself go. Now clearly I defended my GF to my mom by saying she has an underactive thyroid, so it's very difficult for her to keep weight off. But this was not good enough. She accused her of lying about her condition, even accusing her of lying to me about taking medication for her thyroid. Now, I should add that both my parents come from medical backgrounds. Mom was a psychologist, dad a radiologist, so they often say things that I can't immediately defend, such as, she obviously has nothing wrong with her thyroid. I've worked with people with her supposed condition and their hair is falling out. Her hair is too nice. Or, the medication she's claiming to take isn't even for the condition she claims to have. This can be frustrating because they make you feel stupid while you're arguing with them, and then after the matter I look into it and see that they were plain wrong, for example, about the wrong medication thing. Anyway, something like this happens every summer when I return home from uni. Sometimes it's something my mom perceived as me doing that was horrible, for example, hating her and wanting to see her cry, or it's something that my girlfriend has done. Yesterday, my dad told me that they expect an apology from GF. I thought, oh god, here we go again with this crap, and asked what the problem is this time. He said Mum was very offended by GF inspecting the cutlery before we ate dinner. This confused me as to why they were angry, as this is something they have already been offended by, maybe around a year ago. When I got home, I said to Mum what her problem is. She knows GF has OCD, and we've already gone through the whole ordeal of everyone being miserable for a few weeks. She then started claiming that GF doesn't show enough shame over her dinner time ritual for her to actually have OCD, because that's what she's seen as a psychologist, OFC, and that in reality, GF is trying to send a message that my parents' house is dirty and disgusting. I realized that Mum was in one of her crazy moods, so I disengaged and told her to talk to me when she realizes that she's being crazy again. This morning she came into my room and interrogated GF on if she has OCD, if she's in medication, did she get therapy, etc. GF said yes to all of these, and started to cry. I jumped in to ask Mum what's the point of making the girl cry over questions I already told her the answers to. She said that she was having a conversation with GF, and that she has a very good relationship with GF, and that I shouldn't interrupt. Mum then went on to say that GF inspecting cutlery for dirt isn't socially acceptable, and that she should get more therapy to get rid of her need to do this. This interaction obviously made GF upset, because why should she have to prove anything to my mother? I was upset because in my mind I had been able to keep mental Mum world separate from GF world. I really don't think my mum is a bad person, so I try to make sure GF only has to see her when Mum is acting normal and nice. Now, I really should emphasize that my mum is normally a really nice woman, who has been there and supported me when I've been through my own crisis. But when she gets this accusatory mood, which lasts for a tilde month, she really is horrible. There's no point even trying to argue facts with her because she either changes what she's upset about, ignoring what I just said to her, or she takes something as a personal insult, calling me horrible and that all I want is to see her buckle over and cry. At the end of these periods, she ultimately accepts that she is wrong and blew everything out of proportion. So this current era of misery will eventually end. But while it is current, myself and GF will be miserable. Thanks for reading. Sorry for how long this was. The advice I am looking for is how is best to act with my mum when she gets like this, and if anyone was in a similar situation and has any advice. If you need any more detail, because I tried to make this as brief as possible and may have omitted something I didn't see as valuable information, just ask and I'll let you know. Anyway, thank you for watching.